As you've been in the learning and development field, have you seen any common personality traits in people that seem to repeat over and over again?
Oh, that's a good question. So one thing I'll say is typically if you're in learning, you do like to learn. So I see a lot of nerds, and I mean that in the best of ways because I personally am a nerd. I could go into a black hole about black holes or whatever I feel like learning about that day. It's something I enjoy. So I think there is a passion for learning. There's typically a passion of how do I enable or help people around me. We get invigorated by seeing the impact, the positive impact we can make for others. I know I've personally experienced that. I know you and I in our conversations have talked about that, like, oh yeah, we built that thing that helped all these people. And there's a personal pride, I think, in all learners. The other thing that I think that I noticed that sometimes is our worst enemy is we love to help and we love to help everybody and we hate saying no because we really want to help. So a lot of times I think we might set ourselves up for failure because we're trying to help too many, even though we don't have the resources to, and you can burn yourself out really easy. So what can start as a passion can become kind of a forest fire in the background if you're not careful with really figuring out what can I actually offer without over inundating myself across the landscape. So those are some of the attributes that I notice in all the folks that I work with in learning.
You don't find a lot of political people. Are you saying that?
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily true. I will say, though, that when it comes to learning and data, I feel like nobody in the industry has really cracked that code when it comes to, in a corporate environment anyway, applying the learning metrics to actual business outcomes. There seems to still be a disconnect across the corporate landscape of how do we actually prove that this learning course resulted in a reduction of tickets, for instance, for our clients. I mean, we're getting there and we're starting to connect those data trends. I wonder sometimes that we're so focused on creating the learning and the outcomes that we don't think outside of our initial outcome of like, what are they actually doing in the real world of their job that proves that our training actually helped them get that ticket done faster. So when it comes from a data perspective, I don't know that we have that skill set at the forefront with how we develop overall, if that makes any sense.
Do you find that L&D folks tend to be innate leaders? Do they enjoy the leading process or do they prefer to be the doers?
I think it's a mixed bag, honestly. And even if I look at my own career, I had kind of a duality where I never wanted to be in leadership. It seemed like a bunch of drama, frankly, that I didn't want to deal with. But paired with the right role and the right opportunity, I found that I really enjoyed it. And it was something that was part of my job that I enjoyed being able to develop others. So I think depending on what amount of freedom you're given, I guess, in leadership, it can be very daunting and discouraging when you have a lot of red tape that you're dealing with. Maybe you work at a company that there's certain corporate policies where you can't apply logic to a situation and you have to follow a policy blindly based on how it might have been created. So I've flipped now. I really love leadership now. Early in my career, I was more interested in being the doer. I think the maturity that happens, though, is eventually you get to the point where what you're doing, you've surpassed. And so you have to figure out what's that next challenge to the skill that I have. And for me, that was the leadership angle of now, how do I work with a team to influence an outcome without necessarily having to be the person moving the pieces around?
Yeah, that's something that I've had to learn a lot about as well. As what did our manager gave us? She gave me a book called Procrastinate on Purpose. Figuring out how to actually delegate and not have to do everything, because I was in that place where I wanted to do and control everything, and you can't do everything.
Yep. Well,
You have to
honestly,
trust people.
exactly. You have to trust people. And sometimes there's some beautiful magic that can happen when you let go of the reins and you let people kind of free roam and figure it out. I think we, like in our previous team, we got to share that success where everyone kind of had different lanes that they were running in. We'd come together and maybe improve upon each other's ideas or give feedback. But I mean, that was a great machine that we had running. But it couldn't have been that way if I had been like the micromanager type and I wanted to have all of my hands in these cookie jars with y'all. because I would just be getting in your way, honestly. So I'm glad it didn't turn out that way,
Yeah.
because it's something that can be a challenge, because I think there is a certain art to learning. It's very creative, and because it's creative, there's a lot of personal elements that go into it, I think, when you create anything in learning.